Joining me now, Duncan Levin, former Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of New York, and Jeremy Saland, former Assistant DA in the Manhattan DA's Trial Division. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me here. I am definitely out of my league when I'm talking about codes, criminal codes in New York law, so I defer to you here on exactly what transpired in the courtroom. Duncan, let me just start with you in terms of the prosecution articulating, like, this is at least one of the ways in which what Donald Trump has done here could be seen as a felony. Is that what you understood? I mean, are we getting it right here? In other words,
so. I mean, this is the first time that the DA's case has actually really come into focus.
Yeah.
And it was made clear through the testimony today, but really a telling comment made by one of the prosecutors at a sidebar that this is not a case about falsifying business records.
Yeah.
This is a case about the cover-up of uncharged criminal activity. And today we learned what the uncharged criminal activity is that the DA's office is relying on. And really at the core of it is that New York State election law statute. But it's a conspiracy between Donald Trump, the defendant, David Pecker, the National Enquirer, and Michael Cohen to make illegal payments and suppress stories with the purpose of that being to suppress the stories so that he could win the election.
Right.
And that's what's at the core of it. And now we know what the felony is, why it is that it's been bumped up to a felony, because it was a falsification of business records for the purpose of committing this New York State election law.
We keep saying election. I think it's important, right? Because it's not Trump's sort of semi-defense. It's not been fully articulated. Is that at least with some of these stories, or one of them, it was to protect his family, right? But what's being alleged here by the prosecution is this wasn't about you and Melania or your family. This was about you, the candidate, which is why they brought those examples in featuring Ted Cruz and Ben Carson. We went over them at the beginning of the segment, not just to treat everybody to National Enquirer headlines, but I think they made a pretty good point there, right? There's a history here of the Enquirer acting expressly in a political capacity, help Trump in an expressly political capacity.
Absolutely. And if you credit Pecker's testimony, what did he say? Well, he said that I had that meeting in 2015. Mm-hmm. What happened at that meeting? It was Michael Cohen, it was Donald Trump, and the question in substance is, what can you do to help the campaign? And He said, I'm going to be your eyes and your ears. Why are you saying that? But for no other reason, to assist the former president, then he wasn't obviously the potential president, in his campaign. And then we learn what? He's killing stories. It first starts with the $30,000 for the doorman for the alleged baby story. Then we have McDougal. But at the same time, to your point, we also have bad stories about Hillary Clinton. We have bad stories about Ted Cruz. So this was the machine, the vehicle for Donald Trump to do his dirty deeds and promote himself.
What did you make of Pecker's testimony, just as a witness? I wasn't in the courtroom, and our eyes and ears into the actual sort of tenor of it are somewhat limited. But from the transcription, from the reporting that you've seen, how effective was he as a narrator?
I think he is the case. And without David Pecker, there is no case. He puts himself at the center of it. He talks about how we get to Donald Trump. He talks about where Michael Cohen fits in on this. Michael Cohen is the conduit between Donald Trump and the National Enquirer. This whole scheme rises and falls through Michael Cohen to Donald Trump, and he is at the center of it. And I think, in a way, his testimony is almost blasé. Oh, yeah, we were acting, but, doing this and doing that. But he was, the National Enquirer was an arm of the Trump campaign. And that comes out really clearly in the testimony. And the timing becomes so interesting because, for example, this doorman had an NDA which expired the month that Trump wins the election. You can see why this is all about the election. And David Pecker is the first witness. He's the most important witness. He's at the center of it all.
The reality is that David Pecker is going to be cross-examined. What questions would you have for him, given how thorough and also, I mean, it's all fairly sensational, but he was so matter of fact in delivering the information to the courtroom, to the jurors. What would your sort of strategy be if you're Trump's defense?
A large part of this is that he had immunity. And whenever someone has immunity, there's a reason why they have immunity. They have exposure. And if you have exposure, what are you going to do? You're going to lie. At least that's the theory. So that's a main or a big angle to attack. But I just want to follow up to Duncan's point that Pecker is really sort of the hub here, and everything's a spoke off of him. He is so critical to the case. I don't know if he's the center of the case in that as much as Duncan necessarily believes, because you still need Michael Cohen, but the principle of what he's saying is accurate, that without Pecker, Cohen doesn't have the credibility because he lacks it on his own 2 feet. He needs Pecker. He needs David Pecker to stand up for him. So does Stormy Daniels. They need him. He is so critical. So to undress him and take him down, I think you're starting with that immunity issue.
Do you feel, if you're Donald Trump and you're his team, there are 3 people involved in this conspiracy. One of them is Michael Cohen, who's going to be a witness for the prosecution. One of them is Dave Pecker, who's just taken the stand and been very favorable to the prosecution. Where does that leave Donald Trump? I mean, do you think this puts pressure on him to take the stand, or is that too far-fetched to imagine?
Well, I think it's unlikely that he'll testify for so many reasons, not the least of which is that the cross-examination is going to be brutal. But one of the things that the prosecution is going to have to prove is that Donald Trump knew that what he was doing was breaking the law. There's a knowledge element here. It has to be done with the intent to break the law. And one way he could show that is by testifying and say, I didn't know that these entries were being made. I didn't know that I was doing this with the intent of violating the Federal Election Campaign Act. He could do that through his testimony. I highly doubt he'll do it, but I do think that you heard a lot of speak from Todd Blanche in the opening statement, which is called lawyer talk. It's not evidence in the case. And I don't know how they're going to prove the lack of knowledge on Mr. Trump's behalf, but one way he could do it would be to testify.
They do have people in the list of potential witnesses. There are some high-level Trump organization officials who are prepared to testify, who presumably would further corroborate the idea that Donald Trump knew what he was doing. I mean, is there a witness that you've seen from the list of people that may be called to the stand that could be helpful to Trump's case at this point?
Helpful? Not necessarily. If you have witnesses putting Michael Cohen in the Oval Office with you, that's not helpful. If you have a witness saying that Donald Trump was meticulous in looking over his checks and signing his checks, and he wasn't sort of a passive player here, that's not helpful to you. So there's nobody that the prosecution is lining up that will be helpful. I mean, Josh Steinglass and Chris Conroy, it's not their first rodeo. They know what they're doing. So I'm overwhelmingly confident Donald Trump's in trouble, but it's not his burden. It's the prosecution's burden.
Right.
And it's that beyond the reasonable doubt, which is not always an easy thing. And that is why, back to what we started off with, how important David Pecker is to give credibility and validating what this is about. Because otherwise, why? Why would you sign off? Who cares about hush money? There needs to be some nexus. And that's what these witnesses will show.
Do you have any suspicion of what they might try and do in the cross?
Of David Pecker?
Yeah.
I think they're going to do everything they can to show that he's a liar, that what he's saying is not only ill-informed, but that he's doing it because he got a non-prosecution agreement. The U.S. Attorney's Office has forced him there today, and he's trying to cover his bases by lying. And it's really the only move they have. Poke holes in the case, one witness at a time, and that's what they're going to be doing with David Pecker starting probably tomorrow or the day after.
Well, we shall see. I mean, listen. We may know this story quite well, at least the broad contours of it, but when it comes down to the actual trial, there is so much to dig into. Jeremy Saland, thank you so much for your time tonight. Duncan, I think we have lassoed you in for one more vlog, so please stay right there.